Hi everybody, welcome back once again to the Eastfield Gunroom YouTube channel. First of all, I want to say thank you so much to everyone that subscribed to the channel. If you haven't, please do so, because by you subscribing, we can carry on bringing you this great content. So here we are again, back in the gunroom, and even though we're not too far into 2024 already, we are looking at everybody's suggestions that they wanted to see in terms of content to go alongside our excellent reviews. So we've already done the one on the adjustable cane, which was a requested topic. Now, quite a few people have contacted us and said, we'd really like to see your guns, Matt. What have you got? Why have you got them? And I thought, no problem. I will drag out a particular gun I wanted to talk to you about, because despite the fact I've owned many guns over the years, I've had some lovely Miracues, Brownings, Berettas, quite a few Winchesters. I don't actually have that many guns in my personal collection, apart from guns that I use on a day-to-day basis for kind of fitting, etc. However, one of the first guns that ever really caught my eye back when I very first started in the industry back in the late 1990s was the gun I'm going to talk about today. Now, it was a gun that at the time I thought, wow, what a pretty looking thing. It felt really nice. At the time, I didn't know a great deal about shotguns. My passion that got me into this industry was kind of fishing initially. So I was very much self-taught and kind of learning all the time. But this particular gun stuck in my head. And not from that day onwards, but when I kind of started shooting and took it up as a sport and got more interested in shotguns and shooting, I kind of started looking for one of these guns, and I just never found one that I could be happy with in terms of the condition, the specification, the fit, until 2023, believe it or not, when somebody actually contacted me and said, look, I know you want one of these guns, and I've got one. So today we're going to look at my very own pride and joy Winchester 5500 Sporter. Like I said, it was a gun when I first saw it, really caught my eye, drew my attention. And over the years, I've been to look at them. People have mentioned they've got them, and I've just never... I've always wanted a 30-inch multi-choke Sporter. So if we go back to a bit of Winchester history, which we've done in previous videos, the 6500, check it out. The diamond grade, check it out. And 30-inch barrels weren't that common in the late 80s. This is about a 1987 gun, I believe. So a lot of people were still buying 28-inch and also fixed choke. Now, they did actually make these in Sporting, 28-inch and 30-inch fixed and multi-choke. Now, what's quite interesting is the 5500 was exclusively a sporting gun. They never made it in the game specification, and whereby the 6500 was also available in trap and skeet, they never did it with the 5500. No idea why, but obviously from a sourcing point of view, it makes things a little bit more straightforward. But I just couldn't find one. I couldn't find a 30-inch multi-choke in a condition I was pleased with, that hadn't been messed about with, until I was offered this absolute cracker. So, in line with the 6500 video, this is the back end of the Winchesters that superseded the 101s before they went kind of flat here in the UK in particular. So it was the very end of the line, along with the 6500 and 8500 series. 6500, if you know, like I said, check out the video, was made famous by AJ Smoker Smith, who sadly is no longer with us, but an absolute legend in terms of clay shooting. And this gun came alongside it in the range with just a bit more ornate, bit of engraving, and that I think is the reason when I fell in love with it when I first saw it. It's slightly different in terms of the mechanics to the 101. It's built in Japan like all the rest of the Winchesters, part of the Olin Cadentia group, and like I said, and I think I said in the diamond grade video, during the 80s, these were the guns to buy. Yes, Browning and Miracle were out there. Nico had kind of tailed off a little bit. They were very prevalent, late 70s, early 80s. And Beretta were only really sort of coming to the forefront with like the 682s, etc. The Winchester was absolutely massive. However, I think the fact that the costs got quite prohibitive and you've got other manufacturers coming through just kind of signaled the beginning of the end, which is a great shame. But there is still a lot of these guns out there. And despite a lot of them being well-loved, well-used, and in some cases sadly abused, you can still get an absolutely cracking 5500 or 6500 Winchester. And if you are kind of starting out, particularly in clay shooting, this is a gun you should absolutely consider, because they are bulletproof and they're just lovely in terms of the feel and the handling. Not dissimilar to a Browning B25, which again, everyone ultimately has tried to copy and emulate because it's the original over and under shotgun design, but they are something you just have to consider. And I've always been a huge fan of Winchesters. I always will be. But this for me is kind of the pinnacle and the peak of my interest. So why did I buy this particular gun? Now, people who watch the channel regularly will know that I'm all about an oily cardboard box. I like the bits that come with it. I like the originality. Now, this doesn't quite tick all the boxes, although I have to say that condition-wise, it's as good as I've ever seen. It is exceptional, which is why it's in my personal collection. So starting from the action, it's the engraving. It's the engraving I absolutely love about this. It's got this kind of floral bouquet with this carved fences. Got the Winchester logo underneath with a bit more engraving. And, you know, at the time, it would have come up directly against something like a Beretta 686 or a Browning 325. And personally, although I think they're both excellent guns and they're very nicely finished, if you put one of these next to those, there's no comparison in terms of the feel of the gun. So you've got this kind of coin finished action with the engraving. You've got an 11mm parallel rib. And as I mentioned before, in terms of the barrels, this is on the 6500 video. This gun, 1200 kg, magnum proofed. So in terms of sheeting steel and being future-proof, if you like, in terms of owning a shotgun, no problem at all with the correct chokes. 30-inch barrels. The gun itself weighs 7 pounds 11 ounces, which is about in line with what you would get. If you bought a modern sport, you bought a 525 or a Silver Pigeon, it's pretty much what you would get. I always try to have something or try and recommend to people to go a little bit heavier because I'm just a huge fan of not getting kicked about by a gun. And I like to look at sort of something 8 pound in a 30-inch or maybe a little bit more. But they just feel great when you shoot these guns. Overboard to 18.6. And again, if you haven't watched the other videos that I've done on Winchester, do check them out because they were kind of, at the time, they were pioneers of stuff that we take for granted today, like backbore barrels, like multi-chokes going a bit further back in time to sort of 1980-ish. And this gun, I just think it's great. So we talked about the barrels, ventilated as you'd expect with the Sporter. This gun, virtually unmarked in terms of the rib. There's a few little marks on it, but, you know, ultimately from a collector's point of view, it's always your aim to go out there and find the best possible example you can. Should a better one come along, I would have no hesitation in moving this on to own a better one. So like I said, it is kind of a copy of the Browning in terms of design with the full length locking bolt across the middle of the action. And when you close a Winchester, there's nothing else like it. It just feels lovely. Now, even though they haven't quite got the clunk of a Browning or a Marook, and again, the top lever doesn't quite sit to the right, regardless of how much use it has or hasn't had, because that was a safety design put into place by Winchester to stop it bouncing open. They just feel excellent, excellent quality. And there's no question, the Italians make some great shotguns. Obviously, we make some fantastic guns here in the UK. I'm talking about the likes of Boss, Holland, and Purdy, which are kind of a different level and different type of shotgun. But the Japanese stuff is just sensational. I've always been a fan of it. I always will be. And despite having owned a lot of different guns in the past, some much more expensive than this, much more ornate than this, from a nostalgia point of view, I just think this is brilliant. I just love it. So woodwork-wise, American walnut, as you would expect. They had tons of the stuff. Double point checkering, which I'm a big fan of. Now, this is not the original recoil pad. This is dreadful. Okay, I don't like this at all. But again, when you look at a gun that you want to own in terms of from a collector's point of view, and there's a lot of things you want to look for: originality, condition, you know, the balance, all the bits that come with it. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices. So this particular gun hasn't got the original pad on it. Having said that, it's just under 15 inches. It's reasonably high in the comb, and I can shoot it okay. Now, the fore-end design, I don't feel, although I'm a big fan of beaver, has ever been bettered. It's not a schnabel, but it's got a little bit of a belly on it with a rounded front, and it just feels, you know, square edges, a little bit like a Perazzi. Just feels really, really good in the hand. I love it. 7 pound 11 ounces, like I said. In terms of balance, you won't buy a gun off the shelf like that today that just feels that good in the hand. Nice and skinny in the grip. Yes, it hasn't got a palm swell. going back to this kind of period of manufacture, if you bought a gun with a palm swell, it was usually a trap gun. You didn't tend to get it on a sporter. Beretta probably with their 682 were probably the first ones to do it. I can't remember a gun, you know, like Maruk 6000, 7000, Browning 325 Citoris that had a palm swell. They were always a little bit skinnier in the grip. Quite skinny in the comb compared to modern guns. But again, if you shoot one of these, they just don't seem to kick. They're just so smooth, which is ridiculous when you consider they're quite light and they are quite skinny as well. In terms of physics, you'd have thought it would just kick a bit more. Obviously, aside from that, you've got this deep body Japanese action, which is just sensational. So alongside this stock, which is dark, it's reasonably well figured. Yes, it would have been nice to get a prettier one, but at the time, this was kind of the norm. I've also got, which is a much better fitting from my point of view, a much higher grade. I think in America, this is classed as something like AAA walnut diamond grade. I think it came off trap stock with a Monte Carlo and a nice big ISIS recoil pile on the back, which if I am going to go out and do any serious shooting, I would always bolt this on. Obviously, to couple with it, we've got a beaver tail forend. As expected, we have the original box. Okay, like I said, I think just dated this about 1987. Now, this was, as I've said, very close towards the end of what was popular in the UK. Winchester were kind of edged out by Browning, by Miracle, by Beretta, largely because of the price point. You know, you could argue that the Winchester UK bosses got a bit big for their boots, thinking that everybody would always want to buy this gun and they could sell it at a premium, and it just didn't quite work out that way. That's my memory of it. Of course, before they went into the classic double side of things, which is a gun we will look at on this channel soon. So we've got the original Winchester cardboard box, which is very similar to the diamond grade, which we sourced for a client for that video. That had the original cardboard box. And we've also got pretty much everything with this gun. So we've got the original instructions for talking about the chokes in terms of putting them in, taking them out, lubing them, etc. That is something you very rarely see because it's one of these bits of paper that just gets discarded with a box, with a house move, whatever. So that I really like. We've also got the original Winchester booklet. We've got the original genuine vinyl packets that the chokes came in, right down to the original oil paper this gun would have been supplied with. If we look inside the box where the parts are, okay, like I said, we have got the original Winchester bookplate, although it no longer fits the gun. We've also got another recoil pad there because it has been short and sighted to accept that, which is a bit of a shame, but still. And then we've got the all-important chokes and choke key, many of them, with the obligatory thread cleaner. I mean, if you look at the condition of the chokes of this gun inside this Tesco freshness sandwich bag, you'll see how little use this gun has had, and that's one of the reasons I had to have it. So we look inside the barrel bit. Again, we've got the original packaging, the original paper that they used to put on the barrels to try and protect them during transit. And to finish off, if you saw the diamond grey video, I was absolutely mortified the fact that someone had tore the label off and we didn't have all the full details. This gun, the serial number, everything pertains to this box, and it's got the original sticker full length across it. Yes, we've got a bit of brown tape on there, but you know, the fact that it's nearly 40 years old, you've got to expect stuff like that. So this, from a collector's point of view, when you're into classic guns, is just, you know, it's the creme de la creme. It's everything you want. What I'm very fortunate to have here is a gun that I will own and cherish for a number of years. It actually fits me to a point and I can shoot it okay, although I'd like to get out and shoot it a bit more. They're just a great gun. The 5500, the 6500, the 101s. These are guns that people are just sadly forgetting about. You know, 30 years ago, they were the gun to buy. Nowadays, people coming into the sport, particularly younger shooters, you know, if I get a customer looking to take up clay shooting and I mention the word Winchester, they just don't know what it is. You know, they're looking at some of the modern brands that seem to be pushed into people's faces. What I'm hoping to do by talking to you about guns like this on this channel is kind of re-educate people about how good these guns are. Yes, I'm probably going a bit over the top, but you will not beat a Winchester, you will not beat a Miracle. They are fantastic Japanese guns. There are loads of guns out there that are excellent in their own right, but for me, the 5500, this is a keeper. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. If you've got any comments about Winchesters, comment below. Don't forget the website. I look forward to seeing you again, maybe with another one out of my cabinet. See you soon.